are you doing now?
Trying to.
Good day, everybody. I hope you can hear me and everything is doing well. My name is Peter Pronk. I'm
The
working
broadcast
as
is now
interim
starting. All attendees are in
GM at the
listen-only mode.
Benchum, an organization that helps Western people to do business in China as a chamber for the Benelux countries. We are organizing this event together with the USME Center, and today's topic is making the right step early on the Chinese market. Just allow me to introduce to you the USME for a moment. It is a project founded by the European Union, assisting SMEs to do business in China by providing a comprehensive range of hands-on information, advices, training, and other supporting services. The center is implemented by a consortium of 6 partners, and Benchum is one of the partners who's organizing this webinar today. The schedule will last for 1 hour with a short Q&A session at the end. Therefore, I would like to remind you that you can post questions or send us your comments during the webinar through the question pane on the left on your screen. And I will try today to answer the question as we go along or during the Q&A session at the end. In case your questions are not addressed by the end of the webinar, we recommend you to register on the USME Center website and use Ask the Expert service. Our coordinator will soon send you a link to website via this panel. We have organized slides, and if I'm correct, you can see the slides. And as you can see on this one, slide is that we are in the USME Center is an EU Commission funded project which helps the USME prepares for the business in China. In this group, 6 partners, as you can see, the China-British Business Council, the Benchum, the Italian Chamber, the French Chamber, the Euro Chambers, and the European Chambers. Here you can see on the website how to submit your text and questions and comments using the question panels, and that will work for itself. We are trying to, this is our agenda of today. I will share with you some of my experience in China over the last 20 years, and most important to share with you why 80% of the Western companies fails in China, by going through the habits and culture difference between the 2 worlds. And of course I will share some tips that you can use for if you want to start your business in China. 20 years ago, the little girl on the left side in the basket, my wife and I, after 3 sons, adopted this little beautiful daughter, and that was for us the first time when we came to China. We didn't know much about China other than that it was a big country, that we've never been there before, and during the emotion of adopting a child in China, we got to know the country the first time. 20 years ago, China was totally different. It was no highway in Beijing to the city. There was only Terminal 1, and it was very small. It was totally, or not small, it was very simple, and for us a lot to learn during that process. But at that moment, both of my wife and I, we fell in love with this country. And I wrote a diary, and in that diary I wrote down that if they're going to eat bread in China one day, we all have a problem. And not only with bread, also with steel, any raw products. And I wrote down that one day I'm going to move in China. At that moment I had a totally different business. I was involved in the meat business, and I had 10 other small companies that I financed. So it was totally not connected to China at all. My little daughter became a beautiful woman who now is 22 and lives in Holland and studying photography. She joined us to China for a while, but I explain to you a little bit later how that was for her. After many years, I became involved in the wind energy business, and in 2003 China was opening up for technology for wind energy business. And I was involved in a company, and I worked for that company, and they asked me to go to China and try to find a partner. Of course, first I experienced to meet a lesser serious company, or what we say, a more, well, not honest company. And then we met a better company. And finally, we organized a marriage with a China company called China Aerospace, one of the largest state-owned companies in China. During that process, I negotiated on behalf of the Dutch wind turbine company 3 joint venture contracts, organized technology transfer, and I also organized the sale of the first wind farm to be installed in Inner Mongolia. In that process, we learned a lot how to do things and not to do things. And also we built 2 factories in Inner Mongolia. I became a board member, and we set up a sales company in Beijing. And in 2008, both the Chinese and the Dutch asked me and my wife to move to China. So our dream came true. And in the process of being in China, we built the wind farms. And when the Dutch sold the majority share in the Chinese joint venture, the Chinese asked me to work for them and move to them. So I worked for a Chinese state-owned company for 2 years. After the 2 years, I had to step down, because it's very difficult to work for a company that is so state-owned, and it's really difficult to be as the only white guy there. So I stepped down and I started a company called 1421. 1421 refers to the Admiral Cheung that you see on the right side of the picture. He was a eunuch, and in 1421 he traveled the world for the first time for 2 years with a fleet of 130 ships, and he was in China, he was in America way before Columbus. I advise everybody to buy the book 1421, the year that the Chinese discovered the world, because you can learn a lot about why and how Chinese travels the world. As you can see, that his mothership was 130 meters long and was 30 meters wide, and it was a flat ship. And at that time that was very special. He didn't conquer the world by force. He had no weapons on board of any mass destruction. He just arrived with his fleet of 130 ships at any harbor, and at that harbor everybody of course received them, because they were pretty afraid of so much power, and he just only asked people to sign a little document by which then, and it was all in Chinese, they submitted themselves to the emperor. A little bit the first shown and signs on how Chinese do business outside China. So we named the company like that, so both the Chinese and also the Western people understands the difference between the two worlds. Because differences there are, and we all know that. 80% of the Western companies fails within the first 3 years in China. Compared to America, that's only 35%. So that means there is something wrong, and we discovered and investigated why 80% of these companies fails. So we would like to share these thoughts with you, so you can understand, if you are going to do business, where to pay attention to. So let me check with you some of the differences between the two worlds, the West and China. And it's, if I say West, in principle, it's almost only Europe. But of course, Europe grow bigger and colonized a lot of countries. So Europe is everything else, also America and all the other countries around. There are substantial differences that I want to share. First, let me look at the habits. Habits and culture for us is a difference. Culture you cannot change, that's what you have. But habits, that's something that you learn and that you can change. So, and over the time, the differences between the two countries, habits-wise, you can shown as follows. When it's blue, the first slide is always blue. When it's blue, it's the West, and when it's red, obviously it's China. In the West, the I person is very important. That's what we have been brought up with, and over time we grow like that. But if you go to China, you see that the group is very important. That's why in China, in this country, they can build roads much faster, subways much faster, and they can have the Olympic Games ready way ahead of time because they can really work together on things. Western people like to be on time. When I travel to Europe, I can easily schedule 25 meetings in a week time because everybody likes to be on time. And of course, sometimes you have a traffic jam, but you can even calculate that. So Western people like to be on time. However, Chinese people always play with time. They always come a little bit late, and there's always a reason for it. And if I try to make appointments in China, usually it's 2 a day. And because you also are invited for dinner and sometimes for drinking and other activities. So time is a different concept in China. Opinion-wise, we Western people, and you can also look at the discussion within Europe, everybody is not afraid to tell their opinion and also to step on other people's shoes. That's also not a problem. In China, you will never see this. People will go around the problem. They will not touch it, they will not hurt it, but they will go around it. It's a very important difference between the two worlds. Also, when you sit down with companies and you have to negotiate, you have to pay attention to this difference. It's a very big difference. The individual person in the West is very important, and in China, the people can their own personality is not as important as somebody else, so they can make them smaller. So that's why they like to show that they drive in beautiful cars. So that's not a problem. But they will also show you that they are not the most important person in the world. Let me get a glass of water. If you travel to China, then you will recognize that Western people like to order and stay in line before they enter an elevator. It's always like that, and we like to also when we buy a ticket, we like to be decent and ordered. In China, many people like to go in an elevator even before it's empty. It's also because we can state, and again, I don't want to offend any Chinese people also in this room, but state that Chinese people are more ecocentric than the Western people. So they are more focused on that one. So that's why also they drive car differently here in China, and also that they want to go in the elevator on a different way. In any meeting room or any restaurant where you visit China, you will notice that there is a difference on how we deal with noise. Western people like quiet. They don't have any background noise or music or televisions on during dinner parties or meetings. In China, they like noise. When you shut down the television because it's too noisy, a Chinese come by and put it on again. So in the habit sense that we are different on that. In 1970, the Western people were already driving cars. And in 1970, the Chinese people were all driving bicycles. The 9 Million Bicycles song is a very famous one. But in 2014, or now, Western people are urged to drive bicycles. While in China, with the sales of over 6,000 cars a week only in Beijing, everybody drives a car. That's a habit that also changes over time due to the economical changes. Opinion-wise, straightforward, and Chinese, they will get to the same opinion, but they will take longer time. As you notice that in many of these sheets, time is a very important difference between the two. The Western people, they think time is money, and Chinese people think time is important and it can take a long time. Most important is to understand the differences between the two cultures. And you don't need to study the culture, but as a famous Chinese writer once says, Lulu Wang, says that if you don't accept somebody's culture, it's very difficult to work with that culture. And especially when you, in China, you have to realize the culture differences. And you don't need to lose your culture, but at least you have to understand that you are dealing with a total different culture. One of the biggest differences is that the Western world is based on the fact that we are Bible orientated. We believe in a God, we believe that there is somebody that rules us, and we believe in a law, and we believe also that you have to listen to that. With that book, and also with that way of thinking, the Western world colonized many countries. To give you an example is Britain, who just, by the way, exit Europe, but they colonized 74 countries, and but many other European countries did the same. So with that Bible, religion, and don't get me wrong, I don't say anything bad about religion, but with that Bible, we like to conquer the world and tell other people how they should work or think or operate. While the Chinese have a belief, they have they don't have a belief, they have a conviction, they are convinced about something. You see the picture of Confucius, Chen Maoism, Taoism. These are not religions, they are books. A very good example is when Mao Zedong had his Cultural Revolution, he forbid the work of Confucius, but in any speech he always used Confucius. So you have to realize that these are the two differences, religion against conviction. And in China, that's a big difference. The Western people own the morale. And we like to tell other countries how they should live or operate or rule, and that they should have democracy and religion and everything else. While the Chinese don't need that. The Chinese, even from very, very beginning of times, they are convinced that they are the center of the universe. In principle, and it doesn't look like it, is that Chinese people look upon us as barbarians. So the Chinese are 5,000 years old or young, and the Western world is 2,000 years young. So it's a total big difference. They look upon us like that. And when you do business with them, you have to realize that the Chinese is polite, he takes you out for dinner, he's the best host in the world, he serves the best food and also sometimes other things that you're not supposed to receive. But in principle, they think or they know that they are the center of the universe. So always keep that in mind if you do business with them. As mentioned earlier, with the religion in one hand, we conquered many countries. This is a picture of Columbus arriving in America way behind Cheung, and you see, and he didn't go there and just ask them to sign a paper. They took over the country, and they didn't took over only that country, they took over many, many countries. While the Chinese, as I said, with Cheung, he asked people to sign and stamp, but now at this moment, even in the world, they buy companies, they buy the world. They don't need to have a force to run into a country. They buy it. And that's something that you have to learn. There are many examples at this moment of Western companies that are bought by Chinese companies, where the Western companies, and especially the management, has a huge amount of problem understanding the way of the Chinese bosses work. Chinese people, bosses, they don't ask you to do things, they tell you to do things. When I worked for China Aerospace, and it was on a weekend, on a Saturday afternoon, you just get a call and say, tonight we have dinner with this and this customer. They don't ask if you have family over from Holland or that you want to go out for dinner for the last time because tomorrow they fly back. No, they just tell you to be there. The other good thing is that I always learn not to tell my wife because I know that within a certain amount of time, the meeting also can be cancelled. But Chinese people are very directive, and I'm talking about the business people, and many companies owned now by Chinese companies have challenges with dealing with that culture. A good example is also when before China was supposed to get back Hong Kong, many Hong Kong Chinese were afraid of what's going to happen. They didn't know what to expect. So many of them fled the world, fled Hong Kong, and they went to Vancouver. Many of them, because Vancouver in Canada you could buy for $200,000 or $300,000 a citizenship. And in a very short period, many Chinese entered there, bought companies, bought houses, or brought their children to school. And what you notice is that in a very short period, a lot of people in Vancouver got to learn about Chinese people driving the roads, buying their companies, and raising the house prices. So you notice that a lot of people had problems with that after the fact that Hong Kong stayed pretty open for Hong Kong Chinese, so they also went back. So it changed after that. But mind you, you have to realize that it is a very difficult issue to deal with if you don't understand this. In principle, the Western people think that they are long-term thinkers. The Dutch always talk about the golden age, the East Indian Company mentality, but the Chinese thinks that it is very short-term thinking. We are happy with 100 years golden age, but in China they are only happy and they can wait 2,000 years to get somewhere. So imagine also that if you do business with Chinese people, that they have a very long-term vision. They know where they want to go, and during your process of negotiation, you have to try to discover what they want and how they want to do it. It's very important that you know these two differences in cultures. Another one which is also very good to understand is that how Chinese people look upon the rest of the world is if you compare the two passports, the one of the United States citizens and the one of the Chinese citizens. Open or check that, but in the United States it always states wherever you go, the American government will guard you. In the Chinese passports it always states wherever you go, please obey the rules of the country you visit. That's a very big difference between the two worlds, how they think that they should operate outside their own borders. As I said, in the Western world, we still are very proud of old times and the golden age and the things that we have. We are very, in the Western world, we tend to stick and hold on what we have and what we had in the past. Chinese people are very good in looking at the future and investing a lot in the future and make a modern future. So that's one of the reasons why in this country, within a very short period, about 18 to 20 years, 700 million people get out of poverty, according to the World Trade Organization numbers. So this is a country where everybody can become a millionaire and everybody works hard to become a millionaire. If you want to learn more about China, I don't know if you know enough about it, but if you want to learn more about China, I give you three important books to read. The one I mentioned earlier is 1421. The second one is the book on China from Henry Kissinger, the former state minister. And he wrote a beautiful book about his experiences from Mao Zedong all the way up to Xi Jinping, and from Johnson all the way up to Obama. So you noticed, and he writes, he studied it very carefully, and if you read that book, you will understand a lot about China. Third book I want to recommend to you is a book called Factory Girls, written by a Washington Post journalist, And that shows very clearly the drive and the understanding, but also the story of the Washington Post journalist who is comes from Taiwan, the history on that one. But most important, the two girls that she follows and try to organize. Well, we have somebody coughing here. We will. She tried to follows these two girls and see how, on what way, the girls can become a millionaire. Also, very important, and I probably will be finished before time, so I have more time to answer questions if there are any. In America or in the Western world, we are we don't need to become friends to become a good partner. That's not important. For China, it's important to become a friend. If you negotiate with your partners in China, you also have to try to establish a good, friendly relationship together. So getting drunk together or going to places where at least many of our wives don't want us to go is very important in the relationship. They want to see how far and how good you are in establishing that. So America or the Western world says, we do business, we don't need to be friends. The other way around, it's very important in China to be friends first and become partners later or at the same time. In the Western world, we have the network thinking, and we go to these events, we share business cards, and that way we hope to make connections. However, in China they have something totally different, and that's called Wangzhi. Any Western people that would explain to you that he understands Guangxi, I have to call that they lie, because Guangxi is even difficult for Chinese people, and it's something that in principle only can be done by Chinese people. Guangxi is more than just having a network and remaining and having friendships, and no, it's also not expecting everything and trying to please anybody else. It's very complicated. I tried to follow it a couple of times. I failed perfectly, and thank anybody else, they always help me to remind me that I failed that one. So Guangxi is something that is a holy thing almost in China to follow, and we hope also that when you do business, at least that you try to understand as much as possible about it, but don't think that you can be a part of it. We don't believe that. We're already at the final part of the presentation, and that's maybe because I go a little bit fast, but I can, after this, some tips, I can certainly share some practical stories to you. But when you want to do business in China, the first thing that we advise you, and the USME Center will do that, and any other good organized consultant or chamber will organize that, please make a plan that fits your company. Many people only look, from the West, only look at China and to the 1.4 billion Chinese. That is not enough. You have to understand that that market, you have to talk to that market, you have to try to know as much as possible before you ever start to consider to go there. So make a plan that fits your company, budget-wise. For example, if you set up a company in China, it takes almost 6 months, and that's one thing. But your registered capital, a lot of people come up with the question, what is the lowest amount we can put in? We advise you to put in the amount of money that you calculate that you need for the first 3 years, because register your company and register your capital takes a lot of administration work. Also, in the whole process of registering a company, organizing a company, the worlds are not to compare. So let somebody to advise you and make a plan that fits your company. We also advise you to know the Chinese market in all its details. And don't spend too less money on that issue. If you want to sell your product, let somebody check the market for you, the prices, the competitors, the international players, the ones that went before you. You can learn so much from their mistakes. So we really truly advise you, if you don't want to spend money on a market study, as we call it, don't go to China. Also important that you train your people in dealing with China. Because of the difference of culture and habits, and because of the way of doing business together, we advise you strongly to train your people when they start doing business in China. You cannot run in on Monday morning and fly back on Friday evening and expect to do any deal. Everything takes more time. Leave as much as possible your Western culture and values at home. Everything goes different. That doesn't mean it's bad or different. It's just an observation. Things go different, but try to leave your judgment at home. Don't try, when you do meetings with your Chinese, to trick them or have them in discussions on the political system in China, because believe me, at this moment, many people in Europe would wish that they have a system a little bit like China. So don't start arguments on that, and don't talk about hot topics that you and we in the West all can talk about. Doesn't matter what it is, but in China that could be very sensitive. Chinese person will never tell you that directly, that he will never say no or say, oh, I don't want to talk to you on this subject. He will never say that, but you will look very carefully at what he doesn't say. So leave your Western culture at home, but stick to your plan. Many Western people are involved or meet a Chinese company somewhere, and they run into that, and they're heavily fall in love, and they want to build bridges and beautiful houses or whatever, but they forget that in principle there isn't a better and opportunistic people group of persons in the world. Chinese people are very opportunistic. They say yes to everything. So don't let somebody run into you and let that become your partner to marry with. Find a partner that fits your needs. Let somebody search your partner for you, and then you will have a better chance of success. But if you are talking with these companies, also stick to your plan. Every Chinese company will ask for an exclusive right to sell your product. Don't give that away too easily, and especially in negotiation, try to be tough. Nobody minds if you're tough. You will notice when you get the point that you cannot go any further. And that also brings me to we advise you to take time to negotiate. If you think it takes 3 months, then probably it will take a half a year or 9 months. And there are many examples of companies that run in, have a negotiation, and think that after 1 month they have a deal. It doesn't work. You have to build on your relationship. You have to fly in many times, and if possible, don't buy a ticket back. Sit down with an open ticket, and if you need to stay longer, that will enhance your position when you negotiate the difficult deals. Many people ask me, why don't you speak Chinese? Well, first, I cannot sing. Second, I feel that I'm too old to learn. But most important is that I believe that I have learned to listen to the things that the Chinese don't say, and to listen to the things that I don't hear. And while I'm doing business in China, still now, I always work with an interpreter. The English have a beautiful 2 words for translator and interpreter. So we always advise you to use an interpreter. Always bring an interpreter with you that works for you and not the other way around. Don't always trust or rely on the interpreter or the translator of the company that you visit. Yes, you have to pay for it, but it will be your worthwhile money, because also when you got to a problem, the interpreter sometimes can smooth things and don't exactly translate it in the way that you want it to be brought. So an interpreter is an most important part of your negotiation skills. So that's why I don't speak Chinese, and also because I'm lazy, but also because at that moment I can sit in the table and I can look at the people. Another point is that you always need to smile. When my wife and I were there for the adoption, my daughter was 2.5. There was a civil bureau guy who wanted to let us pay $500 more, and at that moment in time, our Chinese guide was fighting about it. So there was a lot of noise, a lot of people screaming. My daughter was sitting on my lap. I was getting very angry. I wanted to get up and hit some people. And my wife was making a little movie, and she only said a couple of times, "Smile, Peter, smile." So even when you're in the worst situation in the negotiation, please keep smiling. It doesn't help you to get angry. If you get your Chinese partner angry, no problem, but um, uh, don't forget to smile in any process. Also, understand the cultures and the habits, the differences. Study the country, study the way they do business, understand that it's totally different from what you have used to. Take your time, and learn about it, because if you think that you can only come here to sell something to 1.4 billion people, then you're wrong. Because in everything goes different from the moment you arrive, the moment you will leave, and we really urge you to understand that. And without that, it's very difficult to work. According to my sheets, I'm done. And now the next question is that we have a Q&A session, which I understand I should see somewhere. Just bear with me for 1 minute, so I can check when there are questions. Okay, took me some time to get the questions on the screen. One of the questions is from Sarah Martin. What advice would you give an SME when having a meeting with governmental officials, official greetings, and how to show respect but still try to get your own agenda? A lot of questions at the same, but I can try to answer them as much as possible. It depends very much in what kind of a governmental level you are. Are you in Beijing or are you in one of the third-tier cities? It's a big difference, so you have to know that one. Governmental officials, and especially since Mr. Xi Jinping came on board, and in the Beijing region, but also Shanghai, they have been ordered not to have big drinking parties anymore in the evening or in the afternoon. So that has been changed, and also not to give away too many big presents. So that, compared to the past, that isn't different. Official greetings is that in China, the tables are usually round and the meeting rooms are long, and the one that is the most important person always sit in the middle, and the people next to it are the ones that support him, and they go back. If you greet, the first thing that you do is you share your business card, and we advise you not to put the business cards in the pocket, but put the business card on the table and put them in the order of the people that sit across you. It's very important that you do that. by that, and sometimes look at the cards, and if they talk, and to check who they are, it's very important, and it would be nice if you have their names. So that's usually the official greeting, and then usually the host first start to talk, and then you can say thank you, and then it goes up and down, and usually the state-owned companies or the state people show a presentation about their beautiful region, and then you can do the same about what you're doing, and then people start. It always goes a little bit slow, so take your time on that one. Official greetings and how to show respect, but still try to your own agenda. Well, if somebody offers you something that it is not according to your agenda, then you can still politely, don't say no, but in this sense says, well, we have to stick to our proposal. Try to avoid the word no and keep smiling and have patience. And if they start talking about it, then keep on doing that. And if needed, sometimes you have to do a week for that. Mr. Klaus, can you describe some real experience examples of failed business deals and some that succeeded and the reasons for those outcomes? Can you describe some real examples? There are many of failures. Choosing the wrong partner, not understanding the Chinese market on a design and using the wrong logo. One important thing that I almost forgot to mention is even when you don't do business in China, but please register, and you can ask information from the EUSU, your brand name, and protect your brand name. It's very important because the moment you enter the market and you give your business card to somebody, then probably 2 minutes later it's registered. And in China, it's first come, first serve. So if you register first, it's not that expensive. So please advise you to do that. So many people forget to do that. Many people think that they can open a company very fast. Many people discovered the differences between the two institutes of company registration. In the Western world, the shareholders are important and the board are supporting the shareholders. Well, in China, it's the other way around. Even when you're 95 or 99% shareholder, if the board lies with the Chinese, then the control lies with the Chinese and not with you. Many companies made that mistake. Many companies were successful because they took the time to invest in the marketing studies and to understand the market, and they slowly build up. It's difficult to share names with you, but there are companies of large size and that looks like an apple, and they're very successful in working in China. But there are also smaller SMEs that sell their products in China very, very profitable and very well. There are internet companies. Yeah, there are many with good examples. Chinese growth has slowed in the recent years. Do you think it's still a good time to come to step? Depends a lot about. It's a good question because Mr. Jochem Geschick, maybe I said it wrong. It's a very good question. On many fields, the Chinese already have the knowledge that they need and they're self-sufficient. But on many fields, there is still a lot to do, and they're open up to help for the knowledge. So in this case, we advise you to check in what kind of a field you want to operate. Consumer market, healthy food, but also elder care are fields that are very important to look in. Luxury good, yes, but many went before you. So try to be special and check that very carefully. But this is a good question, by the way. What kind of assistance do you look for when doing business with a Chinese partner? Well, Mr. Brecht, what we try to do is that we have a good accountant which knows everything on the local ground, a good lawyer, local lawyer that understands all the legal steps and understand the market and for that we need many times a local consultancy company that knows the market and have Chinese people. So that is the assistance I took when I was doing the business with a Chinese partner. and also understand, because it was for the wind energy business. Do you work and live in other cities other than Beijing? I live in Beijing, and we have offices in Hangzhou. The Belgium has offices in Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. And my consultancy company has an office in Hangzhou and Shenzhen and Beijing. Well, if you, Michiel Vos, if you drinking with Chinese business partners, can I reject or should I follow? I would say you should follow. But if you really against alcohol, then you can always politely say that you use medicine and that you cannot drink. But I advise you to take somebody with you that at least is willing to get drunk. So please take somebody with you that can drink with them, because it's much fun to get drunk with your partner. Mr. Kraken Yu, for the Chinese company, we are a Chinese company registered in China. We have a Hong Kong mother company, and we are working in wind energy business. We have 2 customers that we help with the supply chain and with their quality control. You have a long history of Spain. Could you name some personal examples where culture clashes, Mr. Alec Cheung? Yeah, especially the one that I mentioned, that if you try to go into an elevator in China, and that everybody want to go out of the elevator, everybody wants to go in before it's empty, and that's a funny one. The way that the Chinese drive a car is something that I have to get used to. I'm a luxury guy because I can sit in the back of a car, but that is one that I had to get used to. All the other, I can understand that people have a problem with some of them, but I never judge them. And if you go to bathrooms, the habits are totally different than in our world or in the Western world. But yeah, sometimes you have to accept them. So there are not too many, Mr. Alec, that I think as a problem. Let me go scroll a little bit and. Oh, Mr. Baines, yeah, what was the most difficult situations you have seen in a business experience while operating in China? Many times, business-wise, I came to the point that you had to break off the marriage because there was absolutely no way to turn on, and that would, and in many cases also last 1.5 years of negotiation time. That happened quite a few times. On business-wise, sometimes I came into situations that the Chinese brought me to places where many wives don't want you to be, but no is not an option. So you go there and you experience the situation, and also by that you gain a friendship. So that happens. At least that happens to me, and I'm sure that it also happens with other people. Our presence important for doing business when you meet somebody the first time. Yeah, Mr. Jordi Cross Herrero, it's nice if you meet somebody for the first time where you're sure that you want to have some business with. It's very nice that you bring them something from your own culture. If it's a serious company, then I'm sure that they will give you a present before you leave. It could be tea, that could be beautiful silk, it could be all the kinds of things. And yes, it's sometimes important to give them a present that shows your interest in their company. You said, Mr. Alexian Wines, you said 80% of the companies fail in China. Do you know which stage of development is the most risky, most likely to fail? That I can answer very easily. That starts with the moment you start to decide to go to China. This is we invented a word for that. It's called Chinable, and not many people are not Chinable. They should not go there. So it starts with the beginning. If you do go wrong there, you go wrong for the rest. And during the process, you make mistakes. You choose the wrong partner. That can all be done. but then people didn't stick to the plan and lose the control. Um, sorry, Mr. Nick Rousseau, I'm just reading it. I think they are very good and getting you to feel they are friends and they're a good relationship without being Chinese and having real Guanxi. How or old read what is really going on. I hope that I understand your question, but yeah, you can have a perfect relationship. I still have with all my friends from the China Aerospace people, I still have a very good relationship, but I don't have a Guanxi with them. That I don't believe that I have. And I invite them once in a while, we go out for dinner, we have a good time, and we always call each other when we need help, but I'm not a part of that Guanxi. And you cannot always read what is going on, and that's why we advise people to look very carefully and try to discover what really happens in the discussion. Is Hong Kong still an option to work with mainland China? Mr. Kraken, you depends on what you want to do. You cannot hire people from your Hong Kong Limited. That's not possible. You can sell to Hong Kong, to the mainland. You can buy from the mainland, depends on from who you buy from. Yeah, there are many opportunities, but many companies, they set up their local company because they need local invoicing, local fapiaos, and to organize that. Time-wise, we have let me see my questions. Mr. Lan Pu, Birgit, I'd like to ask, what are the main differences in your eyes between Chinese business culture and European business culture? Where Westerners are mistaken? Well, I hope that during my presentation I shared with you most of the differences between the cultures and the habits. Again, I think that Western people too many times want to change China, and they fail because China you cannot change. It's too large, too complex, too difficult. But at the same time, it's the most beautiful country in the world to do business. Yeah, I think I try to answer the questions, and otherwise later you can contact the expert or we can answer some more. Mr. Klaus Mortensen, a difference between doing business in China, north, south, east, west part. Yes, there are quite a lot of differences between the two worlds. You know, you have Han Chinese, you have minorities, you have all kinds of people. There are differences, but mostly differences in sometimes in the food, but also in the way that they run their business with the government. Or if they are more in poorer area, you have more government involved, and if you are a more richer area, there are more state private owned companies. So there are large differences between the various areas. And Fujian region, yeah, you asked a question. I don't enough about that because I don't have much experience, but I will. In basic, a lot of things are the same, but when you are there, then you will notice that. How much time do we have? 4 more minutes. The question is if there are any more questions. Are there any more new questions? I will search. Yeah, Mr. Robert Ravensak, sorry if I'm increased number of tourists coming to China. Is there a place for a European tourist agency? Offices based or online? Well, there are at this moment in time a huge amount of companies in China, Chinese companies, that are organizing tours and trips to the whole world, because with 700 million people out of poverty, you also can sell a lot of tickets and hotel rooms. So there is always place for something special, a niche, but don't ask me now which one because that's very difficult. Yeah, that's try to answer your question. And for Mr. Kraken, the renewable energy is still a good China, or if it's low, yeah, I think for the big megawatt class, and offshore, there are technology-wise, there is a lot of cooperation models to think of, and for the smaller market, for the home market, there's still some market there. But for the onshore, I don't believe that there is a huge market, because the Chinese are very self-sufficient and they have an overcapacity already in the manufacturing. I would change, Mr. Jochen, if you would change one thing in your personal China history, what would that be? None. None. Because all what I've done, I learned and I experienced, and I'm doing that every day, every minute. So no, I will not change that. I think on my behalf it wraps it up. And now for the closing, we would like to thank you for your participation. It's a little bit weird. I'm talking to a screen, and the feedback is on the questions, and I hope that you liked it. And if you have any feedback, please give it to us. We will upload the recording and slides to the EU SME Center website for you to check out later. And well, I want to thank you for a lovely, perfect day, and I hope that you, especially in Europe or other places, have a good day to work with. Here it's almost evening and we start to have a drink. Thank you very much.